Hey there, Dr. Christianson here with you. And I'm really jazzed to talk about calories. And I want to talk about 9 surprising facts and myths about calories. It works both ways. So one big myth is that calories don't really make sense about the whole weight gain process. Somewhere around 1978, 1980, the rates of obesity just skyrocketed. They just totally took off. And many have argued that this was because we've taken in more carbs, more sugar, whatnot. But many have argued that the calorie model doesn't explain that. This has been looked at thoroughly in a lot of ways. They've looked at questionnaires of food intake, not the most meaningful. They've also looked at food production, like how much food has been made. And they've also looked at food purchases per capita minus food loss. And every way you look at it, somehow or other, we've gone up about 200 to 300 calories since 1978. And more calories does mean weight gain, but not in a linear degree. And the reason for that is because at some point when you gain weight, you get to be bigger and you burn more calories. So it does have a tapering effect. But it actually perfectly fits the amount of weight gain we've had since then. However, I want to segue into the next fact. And this is kind of a funny thing because it's almost the same statement on the opposite side. And this is the fact that calories don't explain the obesity crisis. And I like to differentiate between describing and explaining. I think they do a really good job describing it. You know, it's very accurate to say that, yes, we've consumed this many more calories in proportion to the weight gain. But I would argue that's not so much an explanation. You know, I'm not a big sports expert by any means, but you could say, oh yeah, I know why this team won the Super Bowl. They won because they scored 7 more points than the other team. So that's a good description, and I guess it's true, but it's not a very satisfying explanation. You know, by explanation, I think we're expecting to have something that we can draw from that or use from that. Like, what's a strategy for next year? Or if the assumption is that if calories were a complete explanation, that somehow just changing calories could be the solution. And that's clearly not the case. So it's not that people lost willpower or lost math skills, but there's other reasons why we've taken in more calories. That was actually the big focus of the Adrenal Reset Diet. So another myth. This is one that we're hearing a lot now, and that's that carb calories and fat calories work differently. The argument is that carbs cause insulin production, insulin causes fat storage, and that therefore you need carbs to gain weight, and that we've consumed more carbs over this last time frame in which we have gained weight. Now the last part, that's also been looked at pretty closely. We have consumed more food, and we have consumed more calories, and we have added processed carbs on top of the diet, but we never really went low fat. We went from about 37% fat intake to about 35% fat intake in the 80s. So they're both not low fat. But I would argue still, because back in the 80s, I was saying that low fat, extreme low fat, as some were talking about it, was a really bad idea because we need fats, they're essential. But now we're making out carbs to be the villains. And I don't say low fat is the right solution, but carbs are not the issue. That really wasn't the problem. That's not really the source of the calories acting differently. There was actually a very large study that looked at 3 groups of people. One was on very low fat, one was on very low carb, one was on a more moderate diet. You could call it like a zone type diet. And over the course of 2 years, they tracked weight loss, fat loss, compliance, all these factors. And the fascinating thing was that when you went out on time frames, like 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, there was no differences. You know, no one group did better than another group. And if carbs were the culprit for weight gain, the low carb group should have done the best, followed by the moderate carb group, and then the worst result should have been the low fat group. But that wasn't how it happened. They really all consumed fewer calories and they all had proportionate amounts of weight loss. What was fascinating to me was that there was the group average. So I'm just going to make up numbers to illustrate a point. So say the group lost an average of 10 pounds. Well, sometimes an average can be a strong trend, meaning that most people in the group lost about 10 pounds. Other times an average can be a result of a large distribution, meaning that you could have a 10-pound loss in one group because everyone lost about 10 pounds, maybe 9, maybe 11. But another group, you could have a lot of people losing 20 pounds and gaining 10 pounds. That's still an average of 10 pounds of loss. Or you could have it to where some people lost 10 pounds and others gained 20 pounds, but that was very rare. So those things can still happen. And when we got deep in the numbers of that study, it was more like this. There were some that lost a lot and some that gained. So the trick is that it's not really about high fat, high carb, low carb. There are some times where some person may do better than another in one of those ways, but that's not really the answer. Another big myth we see is that calories are something that are innately reactive, independent of where they come from. And the truth is that protein calories are different. So within the macronutrients, we've got proteins, fats, and carbs. So fats and carbs, we need them both. They're both important. We can't jettison either of them. But protein does have a special place in terms of weight loss. And it's also relevant because the amounts of protein that seem most effective are amounts that we tend not to just fall into easily. It seems that somewhere around 25-35% of calories from protein starts to make a big difference. Data has shown that the same number of calories from protein will cause you to consume fewer calories afterwards than the same calories from carbs or fat would. So protein does work differently. There's also good data showing that it boosts metabolic rate. It makes our body burn more calories after the fact. It also suppresses appetite, and also it helps us grow muscle mass more easily, which helps passive metabolism. So those are perks about it. And again, that 25 to 35%, that takes a little bit of thought, to whereas high fat or low fat, those aren't too hard. You just really focus on cutting out one thing and having plenty of another. And there's a lot of foods that easily do that. If you want to go high fat, just add coconut oil on your diet, piece of cake. It's not hard to get to a high fat diet. But a high protein diet does take a little more planning because protein foods are not as dense in calories, and because there's not as many of them, and because they fill us up faster. So that one does take a bit more work, but data is strong that it can make a difference in terms of long-term weight loss. Okay, next up, calorie myth. So food quality is a bigger factor than food quantity. I've heard this one a lot, and I've seen many people who are trying so hard, and they're eating healthy foods, they're feeling virtuous about that, and they think, hey, why can I not drop weight? I'm eating organic, I'm doing my berries or whatnot. Well, there was a nutrition professor who wanted to just target this idea, and what he did was, he called it the Twinkie diet. He basically lived for a couple months on mostly Twinkies. It was just junk food. It was Twinkies and Doritos, Little Debbie snack cakes. I read an interview, he threw in a few celery sticks here and there, but it was like pretty much all junk. But here's the wrinkle. He had an exact calorie target. He made a 750 calorie deficit from what his needs were. And the reason he did this was because he was overweight. He also had high blood pressure and he had some diabetic risk signs. And he wanted to improve his health, but also he wanted to make a point that calories actually matter. And over the course of 2 months, eating total junk at an exact calorie target, he got better. He dropped the weight he wanted to drop. His blood pressure, his blood sugar, they all improved. And he made some responsible diets. He basically said, hey, I don't advocate this. There could be untold repercussions long-term if one were to do a diet like this for the rest of their life. And rightfully so. You'd be losing a lot of micronutrients. You're not getting good plant foods. You're missing out on fiber. And you're getting all kinds of weird chemicals in that diet. So it's just not a smart thing. But he proved the point that calories do matter in terms of just body weight. And there's often been an argument, almost like a false dichotomy, to where many say, oh, food quality matters, you can't count calories, because almost like you're going to end up on that path. And there's no one really that says you should do that. He did that as a stunt, but I've never really heard any nutritionist say, yeah, eat whatever crap you want, but just count your calories. People don't say that. Food quality matters in terms of long-term health and disease risk and colorectal cancer health and all those sorts of things. But in terms of many other factors of our health, our body weight is a huge predictor of chronic disease, and the calories do count towards that. Okay, so next fact, ketogenic diets. They're getting to be popular now, and they're an extension of the low carb trend. So the fact is that they cause the exact same amount of weight loss when calories are controlled carefully. Surprising. Many have talked about there being a metabolic advantage, or they've talked about the way that if you are in ketosis, it doesn't matter what else you're consuming, your body is burning fat for fuel. And the thought is it's going to trigger almost like a chain reaction that'll cause you to burn up your fat. Well, in reality, what's happening is you are burning fat for fuel, but guess what? You're consuming fat. And so you're burning the fat that you ate, which is not the same as burning the fat that we carry. And the biggest study done to date was done by some who were trying to show that there was an advantage to being in ketosis. And they had people in metabolic wards, so their diets were completely controlled, and they had the exact same amount of calories. And one was ketogenic, and they tracked that to confirm they were in ketosis. The other one was a horrible diet. I mean, it was set up to fail. It was half carbs, but get this, it was a quarter sugar. So the quarter of the diet came from sugar, and it was just all junk. But it was the same calorie load. And over the course of this time frame, there was actually more fat loss by a small degree in the junk diet than the ketosis diet. And there was not a metabolic advantage that showed up. So the attempts of the study, what they hoped to show, didn't happen. And this is more intuitive with this understanding. So yes, in ketosis or on a high-fat diet, you are burning more fat, but you're not burning your fat. You're burning the fat that you just ate, which doesn't make your body more effective at burning your own fat. It's just a matter of you're going to burn X number of calories, and once you're through with those, then you'll tap into your own resources. And some people can do better with that than others. If you've got APO4 genotype variations, you probably have a tougher time with that, and actually more fat in the system makes you less able to burn much of anything. So you got to figure out what works for you, but big picture, something more moderate is probably better for the vast majority of people. Okay, next, calorie myth. Exercise is burning tons of calories, and that's why it's helpful for you. And when you're exercising hard, you can consume a lot more food. Well, I'd like to talk about this one as being a myth because I've succumbed to it. You know, there was a period of time in which I was a competitive road cyclist, and to do so takes a lot of training time, and training time is a lot of energy output. I mean, we'd be on the bike 20 hours a week, and not just like casually on the bike 20 hours a week. I mean, like every minute was tracked and counted and intentional. It was intense stuff. And over the course of that time, it would be easy to burn an extra 20,000 calories per week, which is huge. So I would track that via various methods. You know, the bike computer would show me how many miles I would cover. There would be graphs or tables that would say, oh, if you rode this many hours, you should have burned this many calories. And because I wanted to be strong for my next rides, I tried to eat back those calories on top of my other calories. Guess what happened? I was training more than ever, and I was completely going the wrong way with my body weight and my body composition. You know, I was burning lots of muscle mass and lots of calories, and I was gaining fat. I was gaining weight in ways I just did not like. So it was a strong example to where what we think we expend is not so much always true. And in fact, as I got deeper into it, I realized you can measure your actual power output when you're cycling, and you can measure real calories, not estimate them. And whenever that happened, it turned out that the amount you would burn would be so much less than you would think. So you can look at like a Fitbit or the chart on your treadmill. It'll say you burned, 300 calories in the last half an hour. You didn't. Now, one big wrinkle is the fact that you would have been burning calories had you not been on the treadmill, because your body doesn't shut off completely. So to burn, say, 300 calories in half an hour, that's really only above what you'd have been burning had you not been there anyway. So it's not a total bonus. And the other factor is that those things just overestimate by big numbers. So exercise does help in a lot of ways, not so much because it changes calorie math. It makes our bodies better at taking up calories in the muscle. And also it helps us sleep better. It can decrease our food cravings when done right, and helps with our lean body mass. But it's not so much helping in terms of the calorie equation. So, okay, another fun fact. I love this one. Not all calories are equally filling. So in a perfect environment, if your calories were controlled, yes, they could make sense. But here's the wrinkle with food, is that not all food calories fill you up as much as others do. The biggest exception would be liquid calories. So this is really strong data, and this is why there's been more public policy changes on things like soda and sugar-sweetened beverages, and sweetened beverages of any type, and alcoholic beverages too, I would argue, is that there's just no real food offset. You give someone give them a sandwich, and then afterwards offer them some of their food. They're like, oh, I'm good, thank you. But give them that same calories in a mocha latte frappuccino or whatever, or a soda or something, and you drink that, and your body doesn't really register that you just ate a meal. You don't really get a sense that you consumed something. So those don't have a caloric offset. That's true for fat liquid calories as well. So I'd be concerned about the butter coffee trend. Dave's a dear friend, but for those who are struggling with their weight and their calories, you take in 500 calories of just liquid fat for breakfast with no micronutrients and no fiber, you're normally not going to be substantially less hungry, but you did just expend a third or a quarter of your caloric intake with no nutrients to go along with that. So think about where the calories come from. They've done some good studies on satiety, on how much food fills you up. And these have been great. They've given people meals, then afterwards had them just go eat what they wanted. And they've watched to see how soon they got hungry and then how much they were hungry for afterwards based on what they ate before. And they've then ranked these various foods. The winner of that by a long shot is potatoes. Potatoes are like the most filling food per calorie by several studies. Other foods were less counterintuitive. Beans, legumes, high protein, lean foods were also quite filling. But pure fats were not as filling. And also some foods that fruits were often not quite as filling, except for some that had a lot of water and fiber like oranges. But yeah, potatoes were about twice above the number 2 foods on that. So next myth. This is a bit akin to the idea about the Twinkie concept, and that's that you can ignore calories if you're eating healthy foods. And you do want to have a sense about healthy foods for sure, but there are some things that can be good foods, but can end up really pushing you over the edge in terms of body weight. Nuts, I would say that. Nuts are so healthy. Please have nuts in your diet. There's few things you can do that improve your health more than nuts. But I don't like them as snacks unless they're controlled in some way or measured. It's so easy to go way beyond your food targets when you're just snacking on nuts, when they're sitting around. And I've heard many people to where they've struggled with their weight and they were just not making the progress they wanted. And finally, it turned out that was the big variable for them. Like, oh, but almonds are good foods. I was always snacking on them. They're excellent foods. 200 calories is about like 28 almonds. Not very many, a small handful. Do 1 or 2 handfuls a day of nuts and seeds, maybe 1 if the weight is more of a struggle, but don't have them just to be sitting around in bowls to snack on as need be. A couple of other things I would think about would be cooking oil. When you're sauteing something, olive oil is a good food, but do consider quantities. And then also flour products. I think we've gotten in the sense that all things gluten-free are healthy and good, or all things paleo are healthy and good. Well, so flour products, gluten-free flour mixtures, almond flour, coconut flour. Flour is fast absorbed and it's crazy dense in calories. So the drawback about that is it hits your body fast and hard, and you can't always burn it or process it as quickly. So many of those healthy paleo snacks or whatnot, just keep tabs about the caloric counts. But even further than that, I really do discourage flour-based foods when you're trying to improve your health in some way. They're not the best for the flora. It oxidizes and breaks down the naturally occurring fats in the food as well. So ixnay on flour foods, watch nuts and seeds and oils, and that can make a big difference in terms of just snacking and overall habits. So Dr. Christianson signing off for this one. Take really good care of yourself. We'll talk in really soon. Bye-bye.